Hey everyone, welcome to our TechStrong Gang Live, which is all about 2026. We're live in 2026. Guys, we've got an interesting show for you today, a little different than our usual. We're calling it DevOps Appreciation Day. I know Hallmark probably didn't print a lot of cards for DevOps Appreciation Day, but for all my DevOps people out there, know you're appreciated. Let me introduce you to our gang for DevOps Appreciation Day. We've got up north, Chris Blask. Also up north, Kate Scarcella. High up north. Any way you want to take that. Mitch Ashley, and of course the D, Mike Vazar. Gang, welcome. You know what I love about DevOps? It smells like victory in the morning. No, that's an old movie line. What I love about DevOps is it has evolved, shifted, changed, pulled, pushed, stretched, that it encompasses so much today. Whether we're talking about DevSecOps and security or AppSec, whether we're talking about platform engineering, cloud native, GitOps, of course, CI/CD, observability, all of these things are SRE, all of these things are kind of within the DevOps culture, within the DevOps bubble, if you will. And it keeps it interesting, right? In spite of the DevOps is dead stuff that we saw a few years ago, it is bigger and better than ever. The community and the market are vibrant. And as proof of that, this year for 2025, we announced on our Predict show last week the winners of the 2025 DevOps Dozen Awards. I think it was the ninth, I think it's the ninth year of the DevOps Dozen Award. Mitch and Mike may know this, and you may not. We kind of started the DevOps Dozen Awards 9 years ago, a little bit, not tongue-in-cheek, but a little audacious to think that there was even a dozen different categories for awards in DevOps, right? And I'll admit, we made some categories up that weren't really fully baked back then. But as I sit here now, 9 years later, I'm afraid we don't have enough awards to cover all the different flavors and varieties and places that DevOps touches on. And so we've had a change and evolve, right? A couple of years ago, we went to the DevOps Dozen Awards Squared, which is actually DevOps Dozen 2. So we had a dozen community awards and a dozen tools and service awards to kind of break out those things that were sort of open source or community-based and those things that were more on the commercial side of the house to help cover the wide range of different things going on in DevOps. We've stuck with that a little bit, though we've had to modify that year to year as well. Look, we've seen things like AI come in here and change things. And, we've tried to keep the DevOps Award, the DevOps Dozen Awards relevant and up to the minute. I think we did a great job this year. Before we even get started, gang, I got to give a shout out to Andre Pino on our team. Andre is a marketer extraordinaire, analyst. Andre's semi-retired. We're grateful for any time he gives us. But year in and year out, he really sort of takes the DevOps Dozen Awards under his wings and runs with it. So shout out to Andre and helping us, again, make this year's award a success. One last thing, if you're interested, you can go to predict2026.com, register the actual presentations and announcements, as well as all of the finalists were announced there. Mitch, Mike, I'm going to ask you two guys to kick off here because you've been involved with us with the DevOps Dozen Awards now for all these years. What does the DevOps Dozen Awards mean to you, Mitch?
It's a bit of a rallying cry just to talk about what are we doing in the community? What are we doing as a vendor community? What are we doing as participants, advocates, people that move the ball along, people that challenge us and say, hey, we're not doing enough here. We need to step up, as well as people to say, hey, let's celebrate some things that are happening. So it's great to recognize what people have done in DevOps. And as you said, the categories, it really kind of expand, not because we're trying to just give everybody a participation award. No, there's so many elements of DevOps these days. DevOps really as a term doesn't mean what DevOps meant, 9 years ago when we started all this. And I think I've been a judge for a number of maybe most of those years too. So it's a lot of fun to participate in it, but it's even more enjoyable to see what people are doing and see that they're getting recognition for it across the board.
Yep. Mike?
To me, I look at the journey has been rather incredible. And I look at it and I go back in time, and early on, like DevOps was the rebellion against those idle folks who were a little too overly dictatorial in their approach to IT. And the DevOps guys were basically saying, we needed more freedom to create and drive stuff. And now, there's this debate going on in an article that Alan has up on DevOps.com talking about, well, what is the relationship between DevOps and platform engineering? And to me, that's kind of like us stumbling towards something that feels like a middle ground, where we have some structure, where we're not just kind of loosing together all these tools and telling people go for it, but we're also trying to preserve the flexibility and the freedom that goes with DevOps. And so, I don't know, Alan, your article's up there, but what's your take on where are we on this journey?
It's kind of the never-ending journey, and I wish I knew exactly where we are. We're here. How's that? Right now, we're here. Where we'll be tomorrow, there. I think, how people think that the U.S. Constitution is somehow the word of God, that the founding fathers were modern-day prophets that are infallible, and therefore everything, is like, biblical. And one of the beautiful things about DevOps is there is no Bible. There is no manifesto. There is no definition. There is no right, wrong path. I think the best way to describe it is something I heard Andrew Clay Schaefer say once. The DevOps you get is the DevOps you deserve. I've heard him say it more than once. Mm-hmm. That's the closest thing you've got to a creed in DevOps. So where is it? Yeah, platform engineering's here, and platform engineering's great. I love platform engineering. My friend Luca and the platformengineering.org community, of course, all of the great stuff we have on platformengineering.com, it helps DevOps, because I think the platform engineering community recognized that for DevOps to truly succeed, it needed that platform. It needed the guardrails. It's funny, when platform engineering first came out, it was about Kubernetes. If you can get your Kubernetes platform under management, hey, you've got a great platform there. But no, now it's more about IDPs and setting up CI/CD guardrails, which allow DevOps engineers to do, or DevOps teams to do their things. And so, again, that's the beauty of DevOps, the way it's set up. It morphs, it embraces, it extends. All of these other ancillary technologies and frameworks that come down the pike. Chris, Kate, we haven't got you guys involved. I'm interested. You actually both come from a security background, right? So I'm going to imagine your answer is going to be more security centric maybe than Mike's, or even Mitch or I. What does DevOps mean to you today? Kate?
Well, one of the things that I find is we're still leaving out security at the end of the day. And it's concerning. When I personally look at platform engineering, I understand we're basically putting a structure to DevOps. But that doesn't mean that we're putting security as a part of it. And meaning that, let's say, so we have structure. If you're building a house, you have a foundation, but do you want that foundation to crumble as you start to, build your house? And so for me, I still find that security is being bolted on. And I don't understand that. And it's concerning, especially as we talk about AI and the idea that it's just going to be going so fast that if we don't start building presently sec with DevSecOps, we're just going to end up having another platform a couple decades from now, and it's going to be some brilliant new term and still not give us the actual secure foundation that we need to build what we need to build safely.
Chris?
I came to security early in my career, but really second. My first epiphany that set this path was everyone's going to get on this internet thing. And then it was they all need security. So I've spent, all these decades focusing on that. However, it's not about that. It's about the story. And we go back to the beginning. In the early 90s, the story was everyone's going to get on this global network. And Bill Gates himself went on TV and said, no one will use the internet. That's a silly academic thing. What they'll all do is they'll pay me for the Microsoft network. And the story back then was you could divide the world into camps, that everybody believed one of two things: either that the big brother was going to sell us this monitored surveillance system that we'll all submit to, or that the hippies are going to win and this internet thing is going to work. And in, for example, 2025, people would be arguing about phrases like DevSecOps that nobody knew back then, but still trying to navigate this space where it's not all just dictated from the top. So you guys, as you say, people on the screen have spent way more time in specifically DevOps and DevSecOps, and Kate, I've been more on the margins of that, but what I see is our ability to have conversations with technical terms that never existed. And we're coming up with these terms and all their implications and all the conversation we have here because we keep succeeding to build a system that is not monolithic and centralized. And it seems to be the only way to do it. And I think everybody on the screen here, most people watching, we're concerned. We have some fear that it ends up being centralized. So can we, every day, every week, we talk about this, can we solve all these individual granular problems in DevOps and DevSecOps? And I don't know either, but we continue to do so. And that's what I find comforting.
Let me add a dash of hope to this. And I come to it from I recently started describing myself as an engineering operator because building products and building software, and some points in my career also running those things. Now being an analyst, it was about 2014 when Alan rang me up and said, "Hey, Mitch, what do you know about DevOps?" I'm like, "You think you said that? It must be something else. I've never heard of it." To your point, Chris, about new terms. And that sort of launched down my path of, well, what is this and can we use it? And today, I think where we are, Kate, to your concern about it, I'm not going to paint this as, oh, good, it's all rosy. We've figured it out. But what's changed today is we're pursuing at breakneck speed AI and agents and all this stuff, code generation, all these things that we're all concerned about the security of, which I am as well. But also coming along with it are vendors and the open standards to a degree. They're a little bit later than that, of adding in security guardrails, behavioral guardrails, observability, building it into the platform of where we develop agents and we operate agents. That wouldn't have happened. That didn't happen when we started on DevOps. It didn't happen 2 years ago. So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that because we've made it part of the conversation, security about developing software, that we are taking some steps to help secure more parts of AI that we're building, agents that we're building, than we have traditional software before. It's not relying strictly on scanning after the fact somewhere down the pipeline. And it's going to fall short, I'm sure, and we're going to have to do some things to really aggressively fix problems that we haven't addressed yet. But I think we're thinking about it more holistically of software, at least starting to. And the vendors recognize that their customer base, especially enterprises, can't deploy this AI stuff at scale without addressing security. And that's increasingly part of the conversation. So I'm hopeful that we're going to do much better than we've done. And we're going to figure out where else we've fallen short that we've got to do a lot better.
Yeah. And Mitch, you brought up two key words that I love as a security person. That is behaviors and observations. Because I always talk about indicators of compromise, indicators of behavior. If we see indicators of compromise, it's already too late. It's already for us the right of boom, as we talk about. When we talk about behaviors, we're still talking about a left of boom impact. And that is extremely helpful to me. So thank you. Thank you for bringing up that word behavior. So I think that's the key going forward.
You're welcome.
Guys, I want to transition to acknowledge and recognize some of the DevOps Dozen award winners this past year. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to really go through every single one of them, but I'm going to cherry pick ones that I think are important or I want to just acknowledge. And we're going to start off with the community section of the awards, which is a little less than half the awards this year, but they're not less than half important. They're very important, and there's some great ones out here. I'm going to start off with the best DevOps-related video or audio podcast, maybe call it a webcast or whatever. You know, the modern mainframe from BMC won this year. And a lot of people say, mainframe, DevOps, what do you mean? Again, that's one of the secret sauces of DevOps. DevOps has done wonders for the mainframe world. It's really allowed the mainframe to run the latest stuff, and whether you're bifurcating system of record, right, and all of these things. But there's so much good going on there around DevOps and mainframes, good to them. The next one I wanted to pull up is the best DevOps book of the year. And this was a book that comes out of IT Revolution, our friend Gene Kim. It's called Progressive Delivery. Build the right thing for the right people at the right time. It's by James McGovern, if it's cut off on my teleprompter. But
James Governor. Mm-hmm.
James Governor, excuse me. James Governor from Red Monk. Kim Harrison and Heidi Waterhouse and Adam Zimmern. Great book. And it really captures, we talk about the evolution of DevOps. This book really captures that. Even that title is exactly what DevOps is today, right? It's built the right thing for the right people at the right time. So shout out to that book. If you haven't read it, add it to your library. The next one I want to break out, and then I'm going to ask you all to jump in on this, is Best DevOps Community Evangelist. DevOps has always been a community of evangelists, right? We've had, from my friend John Willis, Andrew Clay Schaefer I mentioned, there's been so many great evangelists in the DevOps world, whether they were doing DevRel or what have you. This year's winner was Nathan Harvey. Nathan is kind of a Pied Piper at DevOps, right? He started out as chef. He was the chef guy who was out there preaching in the wilderness early on. He left chef, like many did, and went over to Google. And I thought, well, I don't know what he's going to do about DevOps at Google. But then, of course, Google bought Dora, right? Which was a company started, of course, by Dr. Nicole Forsgren, Gene Kim, and Jez Humble. And they're the people who came out with the first sort of surveys, maybe not the first, but the biggest DevOps surveys every year that showed how high-performing IT teams are performing, utilizing DevOps or not. And we call it, DORA is DevOps Research and Analysis, I believe. Mm-hmm. Google took that. Gene, Nicole, and Jez are not as involved or not involved anymore, but Nathan's kind of taken that over. And Nathan won for top DevOps Community Evangelist this year, and the 2025 DORA report won for Best DevOps Survey Researcher Report. Mitch, Mike, I know we all talk to a lot of companies who will often tell you, and they cite the DORA metrics, right? In terms of, that's the measuring stick they use to how they're doing. the Dora metrics. And Nathan is still out there. He appears on our events, on TechStrong TV, but he's all over spreading the gospel of DevOps. Mike, I know you've met them. You've met Nathan, interviewed Nathan. What do you think?
I like the idea of Dora, and I like the fact that we're tracking some metrics. I guess other folks, and myself included, one criticism people have is the metrics don't always correlate to a business outcome. So it's wonderful that we are, turning over more code and fixing it faster and generating it more, and that may be what the DevOps engineers can control. But I sometimes wonder if we get a little overly obsessed with that particular set of metrics without connecting it back to something where, DevOps teams can go to the business and say, this is the value of the ROI and the return on this whole methodology. And I don't know, Mitch, am I asking for too much here, or what do you think?
Well, just like the DevOps you deserve is the DevOps you get. DevOps doesn't stand still. And I think the Dora reports under Nathan's leadership have progressed significantly. Not that they weren't progressing, but they were very focused on how many deliveries to production are you doing, and that is a primary metric that Dora people use to measure themselves against Dora. And I always criticize that and said, but yeah, if it's the wrong delivery, why does it matter? Nathan's really turned the page and said we need to think forward more of where we're going. That's why this report was talked about. Generative AI assisted development. And he's really taken on the mantra of let's really look at how we're developing software and how that's fundamentally changing, how developers really are becoming the engineers of how software is created, not just creating software. And that process is going to fundamentally change and transform like it can under DevOps. And I think that's the good news. So to your point, I think Dora has been sort of the easy metric for all of us to rally behind, but the environment's changing. And so Nathan's challenge, and I think he's up to that challenge, is to really identify, so in the world of where we can generate software as fast as we want, maybe we can push it to production as fast as we want. Yeah, but what are we pushing? How are we pushing? How are we creating it? And how are we creating value for the business? I've heard him talk more about business value in the last 2 years than any of us talked about business value in the previous Dora reports, which is a great sign of evolution and maturity.
Yeah, kudos to Google and the whole Dora team, and Nathan, of course. I want to make a quick mention about the DevOps event of the year. It was DevOps Days in Zurich. For those not familiar, not from the DevOps world, DevOps Days is sort of an unconference. It's been going on longer than I've been doing DevOps.com. The first DevOps Days was in Ghent, Belgium, with Patrick Dubois. The first DevOps Days in the US was in Silicon Valley with my friend Damon Edwards and John Willis. And since then, I forget how many, like 1,000 DevOps Days have taken place around the world. What was interesting here is this was the only DevOps Days nominated for DevOps Event of the Year. All the other events of the year were vendors' user conferences, which are great. There was some great user conferences in here that were made in the finals, including JFrog Swamp Up and Grafana and some others. But it was nice to see the vote. People still like that DevOps Days format, that unconference, that, it's not run by a single vendor. It truly is the community. So shout out to the folks at Zurich. They are a great example of the best of DevOps Days. Also, I wanted to call out Best DevOps Open Source Project. This wasn't the project you were looking for. A lot of people were looking at, traditional open source projects. But our friend Garima Bhopal, right, did an event. John Willis was a big help to her with it, called DevOps for Gen AI Hackathon. And so it was a series of projects that was spawned out of this hackathon. And Garima is a great community organizer in the mold of Obama or something, right? She really does a great job with organizing communities, both in Canada, she single-handedly has built that, but worldwide. And this was a great project, all open sourced, open everything, not just the code. It was open. And kudos to her. I want to mention, this year more than ever, it's amazing. So we have judges, right, for these awards, but then there's also the public voting. And, the judges are 60%, voting is 40%. But this year, more than ever, last year I saw it too, basically, there were one or two out of maybe 24 awards where the judges' pick did not line up to the voting. I think the community recognizes value and quality. And so I'm happy to say that the over 99% of these awards represent what the community voted for. So congratulations to Garima and the whole team there. Next up, I wanted to talk about DevOps Industry Leader of the Year. And I think now we're moving away from community and into more of the commercial awards. Well, it's still technically community, I guess, but these are more commercial. So DevOps Industry Leader of the Year was Jyoti Bansal. And you know how in the Oscars, guys, usually best director is the best picture, and oftentimes it's the best actor too. We had some of that going on here today. This was a year for Harness, right? Jyoti, of course, is the CEO founder of Harness, technically Harness AI. And they had a good year. Chris, and part of that good year was around security, right? They absorbed Traceable, another security company Jyoti had founded, to give it their security, chops in Harness a boost. AI security. I don't know, Chris or Kate, if you've had a chance to look at what Harness has done this year. Mitch, I know you have, and Mike, I assume you have as well. But to me, I think you take a look at those three awards together. Jyoti is Best DevOps Industry Leader. Harness for Best End-to-End DevOps Solution. And then also, I believe Harness won for Best DevOps Platform Engineer Award for their Harness IDP. They actually came out with their own IDP. So, first of all, congratulations to Harness. But gang, any thoughts? Anybody want to contribute or speak about that?
I'll jump in just to kind of kick things off. What I think is notable about Harness, and of course, I followed them for a long time before even being an analyst, is they very much are a platform company, but they lean to the right. They're very much after code has been their strength, and they continue to do that, including in the age of AI. So they're very much a software delivery platform, and now they've pursued and added more agentic automation. They've really invested in knowledge graph technology to bring contextual information into AI and also some of the other parts of their offerings. Really deep DevSecOps integration. They have really continued to innovate and not just stayed where DevOps was or DevSecOps was 3 years ago. They're continuing to really take a leading stance. I'm very bullish on what they're doing in many areas. They've got some places to shore up. I'm not going to focus on those things today, but Jyoti's really done a great job, and he's recognized as a great leader in the industry, and he's done really well with Harness. And so I think they're going to continue to do great things.
Yeah, and you folks know more about DevOps side of it, but what I've seen from this is that they're making platform engineering not theoretical, removing friction instead of putting in gates while doing the security threat of it. So I've liked that. I've seen that along, but I again don't have the depth of understanding on the DevOps side of that. But that just seems logical, and that's where we've been going with this.
I think, the one thing they do really well is they strike that balance between I want to choose my tools and I want an integrated platform, because while theoretically you can buy their entire stack, they also let you swap out things more easily, and they don't necessarily dictate the platform to you. So I think there's a natural tendency where DevOps shops don't want to necessarily buy that fully integrated platform. They kind of want some choice, but they want it to feel like a platform. So it's one of those, I want my cake and eat it too kind of scenarios.
And the reason why that becomes important is that then you prevent this this hacking, for lack of a better word, that then makes things less secure. So that's why that piecemeal is good.
You know, right around the end of the year, Harness announced a major new funding round with like a $5 billion valuation.
Yep.
And I interviewed Jody about it. And in the DevOps.com article I did with it, I also embedded a podcast, a DevOps chat podcast I did when Harness launched, I think 8 or so years ago. What's interesting is, for those of us who've been around, like when I first started DevOps, right? CloudBees, GitLab, later on JFrog. They were the 3 big DevOps end-to-end platforms, and they focused on CI/CD. I remember interviewing Jody early on, and he said, well, I looked at this the same way I looked at the application management, APM market when I started AppDynamics. And I said, what's missing here? What doesn't work? And the problem, and from Jody's point of view, is all of these CI/CD platforms were CI first and then CD. But Jody thought that the emphasis should be on CD. And he made Harness a CD, a continuous delivery platform, more than a CI/CD platform. It was the first time I saw CD decoupled from CI, right, in DevOps. And that was the mantra early on. They've always tried, you know, he named it harness.ai before we, you know, this is 8 years ago, whatever, before AI was cool. He had the vision of, maybe he was talking more about machine learning, truthfully, but he had the vision then of doing it. And so as we sit here today, you know, when we looked at best end-to-end DevOps platform, Harness really stood out. They really built that platform, including the platform engineering, the IDP piece of it, including Mitch, the observability piece of it, including Kate, the cyber, the security piece of it. They really got some great security chops in there. So again, just kudos to the Harness, Jody and the whole Harness team.
I can add one more thing about Harness too, and I think this sets the stage for the broader industry is, they had, I think it was 240 million Series E, but they've got 250 million in ARR at like 50%, I think, year-over growth, if I remember right. So it's humming. It's moving really well. And I think there's a couple of reasons why that have implications for the broader industry is, like you said, they're not just leaning into the CD. They're going down a path that you might call the kind of the AI control plane for what happens from the delivery point on. And that's a lot of the investment in this delivery knowledge graph, which of course can be used not just in delivery, but pre-delivery as well. So they've invested in technologies and taking an approach that I think set the stage for where we're going, not where we've been in CI/CD. And at the same time, to your point, they recognize, like kind of the AI vendors, is they can't be everything to everybody, and everybody's going to have 20 different tools and different things. They may consolidate, but they're still going to have 4 or 5 of everything. And they've got to work with the tools that people have. So you have to meet people with where they are, customers with where they are and where they're going. And I think all of those are key elements of any successful strategy looking forward.
Yep. Got to move along here a little bit, guys. I want to next call out the good folks at Octopus Deploy. Right? They won for best application of Gen AI in a DevOps tool or platform. Octopus Deploy, you know, I remember first meeting these people. They're down in Australia. I felt terrible. They were up at 1 in the morning to do their TechStrong TV interviews with me. They, of course, bought or acquired CodeFresh, the people really behind what became Argo, one of the biggest, I think it's the 3rd largest open source project in the CNCF. Fantastic. right? They've really made their mark on the space, and they've really kind of taken the lead when it comes to AI, using generative AI and even agentic now too. So I think this is an up and comer. If I had to pick who's the next harness, it's Octopus.
Interesting perspective. I'm happy to jump on them as well. They have, they're still kind of framed as the CD part of specialist in terms of what Octopus is doing, but they've invested not just in MCP, access to what they're doing, but they've also created, I believe it's some kind of, I think it's the AI recovery agent, if I recall, about where we can look at where failures are, what's happening, root cause analysis in the pipeline itself, right? Not just leading into production. So you can also recover earlier in the deployment cycle as well as once you move into production. And we see a lot of investments right now where companies are making investments in, for example, feature flag capabilities that push all the way up into the deployment cycle as well as what gets deployed into production, and tying that to observability. That was a company that Dynatrace acquired. So I think Octopus got a bigger vision for what's happening in the CD pipeline. And that's part of why you have that sense, Alan, as of an up and comer, as they've got a vision for where this is headed.
One of the things I like about what that whole community is doing is that they give you an option for CD, right? Not everything has to be programmatically addressed. You can use a graphical tool to manage CD. And that makes the whole thing more accessible to a larger number of people who may not have the programming skills, and they're just mere mortal IT administrators that want to do continuous deployment. This is a good thing.
Absolutely. Hey, let's jump to a security thing, right? Best supply chain security solution, right? And this is something, look, every year at RSA, we do the DevSecOps days on Monday, and certainly supply chain security has become the focus of security, pre-deployment. So best supply chain security solution was our friends at JFrog, the JFrog platform. And JFrog, I think more than any of the other big DevOps platforms who talked about becoming a security company, has become a security company. They've acquired more than several security startups that they folded in for security DNA. And their supply chain security solution, everything from X-ray to they have AI supply chain, AI security. They've really become a security solution. I think it was recognized here as such.
Yeah. For me, if you can't prove where it came from, you shouldn't trust where it's going.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. It's a fair comment.
Kate, I want to ask you this question though, because we talked about security earlier, and you hear the phrase security by design all the time. But I wonder if, just like as humans, we're conditioned not to think about security after the fact. I mean, you build a house, then you put the windows on, and then you put the doors on, and then you figure out where the locks go. So, that may not be the best approach for software engineering, but is this just kind of like, have we brought forward something that we are mentally conditioned to do after the fact?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I believe that my hope is that security gets to the point where, as a consumer, you can walk into your house and turn a lock and voila. And I know, that's, crazy talk. But, my hope is, if I'm looking at, secure by design, I also think it has to take in agency of the person. So like who, it just goes back to what I just said, where is this coming from? And so maybe the house is not the best example. Although the only thing I would add to that house example is that when we're building, like you're doing cement or whatever, you definitely are putting in elements that make the foundation strong. So it's not just windows and doors that we're thinking about. It's also the components of the house that matter. The foundation, the foundation is everything, and it gives you not only hope, but it provides the framework And that to me is very much security, is framework, and that should help us build our security into DevOps, right? Is the components, just like a house. So I'm going to go back to the house. I'm sticking with my house. I'm sticking with the foundation.
This old house.
Well,
That's right.
exactly. Because it's all about story over time. Like I can geek out. Last 6 years I've gotten deep into supply chain. I can tell you more about why there are 8 fields and SPDX versus like. But what I really care about is that something seems to make sense and it continues to be coherent over time, right? I just got to say this out loud. DevOps, for those who don't know it, is the idea that developers and operators should speak to each other. Right? The basic principle, right? And we should ask the security people, DevSecOps. And as we move through time with these things, somebody will say something. It's like, we should have it that way. Kate, I should be able to walk into my house with a key. And then, well, you can't do that because that requires all these things. And as I said at the beginning, we've been competing since the early 90s in, does someone build this thing and tell us what to do, or do we build it? And we continue to go down the storyline of, we should do this. Somebody says it turns into a working group, and we come up with a solution, move forward. And that gives me a lot of hope. The specifics of it, failure states and things breaking, that happens all the time. Working out better or worse, that's a big deal. But we keep going down this path where, no, we don't need someone to tell us the answer. May be impossible, but things like developers and operators just speaking to each other turns into the whole industry.
Chris, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I feel like, and I've said this before in the show, at some point, those two should actually marry. I feel like it's been like this contentious sort of divorce, and like, are we, we're going to be separated? No, wait, we're married. No,
Right.
No, we're friends with benefits. What are you talking about?
All right. On that note, that's the key to move on to the next category here.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to talk about best observability solution. In many ways, 25, 24, if it were not for AI, observability would be the story. Because we've made tremendous strides. Observability post-deployment, observability pre-deployment, observability moving information, feedback loops from post to pre. And really, the good folks at Grafana Labs and their Grafana Cloud product, in a very open source friendly way, right, have led the charge in many ways on observability. Of course, OTel, Open Telemetry, is the king of the hill when it comes to open source observability, second largest CNCF app. But right behind it, you have Prometheus, which Grafana is a big a promoter of and contributor to, as well as to OTel. And then Loki is actually a Grafana project that's also in there. But I just want to shout out to them. They really have, not single-handedly perhaps, but in a big way, helped move the needle to make observability as integral as it is to the whole DevOps way of doing business.
You highlighted the open source, which is super important. I think their M&A strategy has really picked up too. They just announced the acquisition of Tail Control. That's what it is. Yeah, Tail Control in this month actually, and that's all about AI assisted tracing and sampling across their existing. They acquired a company, I think it was Pyroscope, in 2024 or 2023, that they're building upon. I would be surprised to see them doing some more M&A across this. So they've got a multi-pronged strategy. We used to think of Grafana as what? Dashboards, right? Yeah. Alan?
Yep.
That was, and you tacked on Grafana to whatever open source tool or product for your dashboards, and they've really become a much different company today with Grafana Labs.
Yep. Guys, we're almost out of time. I want to speed ahead. One last, there's some great, I should call out Sonatype won for best DevSecOps solution for their SCA tool. So Brian Fox and the Sonatype team, good for them. Rookie of the year, as I call this one, best new DevOps tool, Gombach AI. I met them up at Platform Engineering Con. Another old security guy, you know him, Chris, Ian Amit, right? Smart as a whip,
Oh yeah.
security guy, but really using AI to help secure code. I want to give him a shout out over there at Gomboc. That's GOMBOC. Guys, we're out of time. Doing this live format, we're locked in because we can't edit it later. Mike, I appreciate you coming up with the idea of DevOps Appreciation Day here. Next year we'll do greeting cards, but it was a great idea to highlight the winners of this year's DevOps Dozen Awards. You could go to DevOpsDozen.com to get more information there. As I said, you could also go to Predict 2026 to see the presentations as well as the finalists. Kate, Chris, I know this wasn't exactly 100% in your wheelhouse. I appreciate you coming on, though, and contributing valuable input into our discussion. Mitch, couldn't have done it without you, and Mike, of course. That's it for today's DevOps Gang show, though. We'll be back tomorrow, back to our regular format, so stay tuned for that. We've got TechStrong TV coming up, though. Check that out. I got to go run to a webinar on what else? DevOps and security. But until tomorrow, this is Alan Schimmel. We're out.